And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. And today I'm really, really, really excited to have Chip Conley on board with us. Hello, Chip.
Hello, Peter. Great to be with you.
Thank you. So let me give everybody, as if you don't know who Chip is, I'll give you an abbreviated bio. He's a rebel hospitality entrepreneur and a New York Times bestselling author. He disrupted his favorite industry twice, which is pretty cool. At 26, he founded Joie de Vivre Hospitality and transformed an inner city hotel model, developed that into the second largest boutique hotel brand in America, sold that off. And then he was very involved at Airbnb, blowing up the industry that he came from. He's a TED speaker, he's an author on a variety of topics, one better than the other. Emotional Equations, one of my favorite books. Peak is one of my favorites. And if you haven't seen his TED Talks, you're in the minority because they're fantastic. And here we are. So you've got a new book coming up, and we can talk about that a little bit, but welcome.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the fact that we've actually spent some time in the past brainstorming about my thought leadership, and you were very effective in helping me sort of focus.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That was a while ago. That was fun, and I think that was during the Emotional Equation launch there. So, let me ask you this, Chip, because you're a nonlinear guy, I would say. So, how did you get here from the standpoint of thought leadership? Right. So you're a business guy, and there's lots of other things that you do. But talk to me sort of about how you think about content and thought leadership, and how you put it out into the universe.
I can't say that 20 years ago when I first wrote my first book, I can't say that I was looking to be a thought leader when I grew up. And in fact, if I go back even further, maybe 45 years to when I was 12 years old, I can't say that knew I would be a writer when I grew up. I actually told my parents I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and they said, writers are either poor or psychotic, and most are both. And I didn't really know what that meant, but it didn't sound good. But what became clear to me after starting my boutique hotel company, Joie de Vivre, at age 26, is that I appreciated every few years taking stock of what I'd learned and then looking at how can I encapsulate that? How can I metabolize that in a way that would be helpful for me, but also for my company? And then over time, maybe for a larger audience. And so that led me to starting to give speeches. That was sort of inbound interest that sort of said, hey, we want you to speak. And then I spoke with a guy named Alan Weber who created Fast Company magazine. Well, he was the managing editor of Harvard Business Review. And he really said to me, if you're going to write books, go give speeches. His advice was when the process of, if you have a seed of an idea, go out and talk about it and then see what gets juicy for you and see what's juicy for the audience and follow that and focus on that and then start writing articles about it such that by the time you actually write your book, you've really become the thought leader in this space. And so that's what I've tried to do is I've tried to seed an idea out there, develop it, and then by the time I actually launch the book, feel like, okay, I've become an expert in it, even though 2 or 3 years earlier, I might not have known a whole lot.
So let me play that back because it's a very effective and smart approach. Because oftentimes people do the exact opposite, meaning they create an isolation. I have this idea for a book. I'm going to drill down and sort of the stereotype of the isolated author with a tweed jacket and a cigar or something like that. Just whittling away and going and going and going, and then they put it out into the world. And then it's sort of binary, right? Like it's either a flop or a hit, right? And more often it's a flop because there's no feedback. But when you're testing the ideas, right, you get up and do a keynote and you say, "Let me try this new thought I've been noodling with." You sort of know in real time, like if that's a thing or they've glazed over. And you do that a few times. By the time the book comes out, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to be a hit, but it's been market tested, if you will, from a conceptual standpoint. Would you agree with that?
Like it's sort of like what happens in Silicon Valley now with this agile development. People go out and try things, iterate, such that by the time you actually go launch in a bigger way, you know that you've got a great product. And I guess this is my fifth book, but my third book, Peak, was it just like hit the market at a time where the market really needed to hear it, I guess. And it was not a New York Times bestseller; it was a San Francisco Chronicle bestseller. But I would say it had a deeper, more evangelical set of customers who loved. And then Emotional Equations was a New York Times bestseller, and that had a lot to do with just really getting me out there on the lecture circuit, giving talks such that by the time it came to the market January of 2012, there's a huge demand for me to be speaking about that. And Modern Elder Academy is, luckily, I've spent the last 5.5 years side by side with Brian Chesky, the co-founder and CEO of Airbnb. He's 21 years my junior. He asked me in early 2013, after I'd sold my boutique hotel company, if I could come in and help his little tech startup become a hospitality giant. And the reality is he wanted me to be his mentor, but I also was going to be reporting to him as the head of global hospitality and strategy. And so I was able to start formulating this idea of like, wow, this is not a traditional elder role. The traditional elder had all the knowledge and then dispensed it. And the modern elder is as much an intern as they are a mentor. Because I'd never worked in a tech company at age 52. And now all of a sudden I'm surrounded by people talking a language I didn't understand. So that's really where the idea got formulated. I started talking about it within Airbnb about what does it mean to be a modern elder, because I was 2 generations older than the average employee. And it just allowed me to start to develop the idea such that now, 3.5 years later, after I first coined the term modern elder, the book is coming out.
One of the other themes that you mentioned, and I think it's really, really cool, is that you don't just pull things out of the air, right? You're a thoughtful person. I'd say you're a lifelong learner. You're curious by nature. And when you put content out, be that in speaking and then ultimately in a book, it's a result of you living through it. It's not fiction, right? So this modern elder thing isn't manufactured. You coined this because it was real and based on your experience. So define for me what is a modern elder? So you said it's sort of the mentor and the mentee at the same and the intern, but what is that and why do you think right now, because you're really good on timing, why is now sort of the time that the world needs to hear this message?
Well, I think Travis at Uber wish he had a modern elder by his side. He might still have a job. But the thing for me, just to answer your first part of the question, is I'm a weird guy. I am both a practitioner, literally running companies in the workplace, doing 40, 50, 70-hour jobs, and then choosing to write at the same time. I don't use ghostwriters. I do all the writing myself. And so that's an unusual thing. And I like it. It's my way of, again, trying to distill my wisdom. What became clear to me at Airbnb, and then as I looked at the sort of Silicon Valley world and realized that 7 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world today are tech companies. So pretty much the whole business world now wants to be a tech company.
Sure.
Well, what we see there is a huge, huge preference, or you could almost say bias, for youth. And because we are more and more seeking digital intelligence, what I call DQ. So EQ has become more important than IQ or EQ, you being emotional intelligence.
Yep.
Therefore, there's a tendency for many, many companies, not just tech companies, but all companies, to start looking at like, how are we going to get some more digital natives in here to help us, become a modern company? That's all great. I mean, there's a great piece to it. Like never before in the history of business have we ever seen power cascading to young people like we do today.
Right.
But the thing I started to notice is like, wow, we expect these young digital leaders to miraculously embody the relationship wisdoms or leadership wisdoms we who have been around a little bit longer have had decades to learn. And so I really started seeing that a lot of these companies they know technology well and they have a beautiful idea of the future of the business plan, but they're really off when it comes to understanding like organizational savvy. How do you create, a culture? How do you create, Airbnb had a great culture before I joined, but the guys, they didn't know how to run a business. They'd never run a business before. So there are a lot of things that I could be helpful with. So a modern elder is as much that curious learner, the person who sort of says, I'm going to put myself in a new environment and learn something new because change is happening faster than ever before. And if you're not constantly learning and you're an elder, you become less relevant with time. The elder of the past was all about reverence. The elder of the present is about relevance.
Let me ask you this. You're a marketer, so you've got an advantage in this space because a lot of thought leaders and content folks that come in think, my job is to create great content, write the book, and all that other stuff. I find it really upsetting when I talk to someone that's wicked smart, really passionate, and their heart and soul's in a book, and I talk to them 6 months later, and it's like, oh, I just spent, $1 zillion with a PR firm and did an AM radio tour. And I'm like, okay, do you know anyone that listens to AM radio? Number one. And number two, if they did, do you think they're actually going to respond and buy the book? Like, why did you do that? And they said, well, somebody recommended this, great PR firm, and that's what they told me to do. How would you advise folks that are maybe not marketing savvy to be not skeptical, but logical when it comes to getting into sort of the marketing and the launching and the whole thought leadership planet?
I think the critical question to ask is this. It's who is your core audience? And what are the most influential ways for you to have them understand what you're writing about and take action around it? And so I don't think there's a specific roadmap that's perfect for all books. In some cases, getting you out speaking about the book is a really important way to have people hear it. But in other cases, like the book, there's no speaking platform for psychiatrists. Yes, there are a few psychiatrist conventions, but not very many.
Conferences, yeah.
The conferences are limited, and there aren't that many companies that are going to bring in, or industry associations that are going to bring in a psychiatrist to give a talk. So maybe in the psychiatry world, if you think your core audience is other psychiatrists, it's one thing, and therefore it's more academic journals and other kinds of things.
Sure.
If it's a lay audience, a broader audience, it's a self-help book, then who is that audience? What's the demographic about them? Meaning,
Yep.
age, sex, gender, color of skin, etc. What is that? And then what's the psychographic? What's the personality type? And how do they get influenced? And if it's social media, then there's a social media campaign that might be behind it. Social media sort of can be applied to anything, frankly.
Sure, of course.
But there's, beyond that, my general feeling on something like the person I'm talking about, who's a psychiatrist who's trying to get a self-help book out there, is, you need to sort of say, okay, there are who are the top 20 thought leaders out there in the space who have a large community and audience following them. One at a time, look at those top 20 and know that of the top 20, you might get 3 that actually will write about you, but figure out how to build a relationship. And don't just think like a cold call to Oprah to get you on her
She's
show.
busy.
It ain't going to happen. She's on your top 20 list. She might be number 1. The likelihood of you getting on Oprah is small, and it's going to take some good luck or some good contacts to have it happen.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. My guest is Shane Green. I've known Shane for, probably over 10 years now. Shane's the author of an amazing book that came out about a year and a half ago called Culture Hacker. He's the CEO of SGEI, which trains professionals who inspire iconic brands. So he's trained the NBA in customer service, W Hotels, NetJets, MGM Resorts, BMW. He's done some television work, a speaker around the globe. He's been in this content space for a long, long time in a variety of ways. So thanks for joining us today, Shane.
No problem. Nice to kind of be here. After that introduction, I'm exhausted myself with all that stuff.
Let's talk about your journey, because your journey is an interesting one in terms of the expertise in hospitality, really on the ground there, and how that's evolved for you over the years. So maybe let's sort of move the journey now to you sort of change your thinking on how to improve customer experience levels and customer service at organizations and move it from training to touching on culture. And then there might be times you go back to training. Then you decide to write a book on culture, right? So you did Culture Hacker. What was that experience like? Because a lot of our folks listening today either have written books or in the process of writing a book or thinking about it. Share with us your Culture Hacker, behind the scenes at Culture Hacker, if you will.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm probably going to ruin the book writing experience maybe. Listen, as I said, I wrote a book. Okay, why did I write a book? One, because no one else was writing that book. And it's one of the things that I've come to sort of learn, and I talk about it a lot, is like culture is not an HR thing. Yet for many organizations, they basically put the responsibility of culture on the HR team. And so therefore, you've got lots of HR sort of people surrounding the sort of circling the wagons that they're very protective of culture.
Which means they're the ones getting the nasty email from the boss when the employee engagement survey comes in bad.
Yeah, they are. But what the problem is, they're not getting the nasty email from the customer. And I think this is where the big disconnect is. So, what's most interesting is when we're brought into an organization, it's not from the HR group, it's from the ops team. And this is where you start to get that disconnect, is that in most organizations, culture is an HR institution. It's protected. And I don't blame HR either, by the way, because it's the most fun part of their business. Gets them out of the administrative way. But let's face it, most of them are snowed under with administrative and legislation and all these other things. They actually forget to talk about and focus on people. So the reality is that they're protective of it, and the ops team are kind of going, hey, I kind of get what this guy's talking about. It's like, you know what, if I could just make my employees feel a little bit better, immediately our scores are going to sort of go up through the roof. And I think this is the piece that we started to get to, is that it has to be an operations focus. And so the idea of culture, it's funny when you sit in a room and you're sort of presenting this out, you have everybody nodding, and all of a sudden the HR person who thought they were coming in to tick off on a training program realizes that someone's about to get into their protected space, start to sort of upset things. It really is an interesting dynamic. So the HR team needs to be more connected with the operations team, is one of the most fundamental elements that we bring to the table. And so when I wrote the book, I'm an ops person. I wrote it from an operations perspective. I'm like, here's what you can do as an operator to actually make your people feel good. And it's not rocket science. It doesn't cost millions of dollars. It's actually relatively simple. So I wrote the book, and again, I'm not a writer, as you probably know, but what I started to do is I was just writing blogs, and I was given some good advice that, hey, just start writing a blog a month and make it a chapter of the book, or at least the outline. And we sort of did that. And, after 12 months, we actually had 13 chapters written, pretty good synopsis of the chapter. And my marketing person at the time says, let's just send this out as an exercise. I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm like, not thinking that anybody's going to pay some interest to it. But, I think the topic, I think the angle coming from sort of my background and the fact that we've worked with so many kind of big companies, like there was some interest. So we ended up writing a book by default. And, it was kind of interesting that as a speaker, people out there, as a speaker, people want you to have that book because it's kind of like your stamp to the big boy class. But more importantly for us, it's become by far our best marketing tool. And I think that's where, I do a lot of speaking. We've done the TV, but at the heart, we're a business, and our consulting business, as a result of the book, I think what it does is it creates interactions, conversations. It's a talking point. It's a fantastic sales tool. The fact that you turn up to meetings or before, people are interested and you send them a copy of the book. There's a great kind of, this person might know, what they're talking about. And I can tell you, as you said, it's been, just under 18 months since the book came out. And in that time, we've got two massive consulting projects.
That's where I want to go, Shane. So I think you've always had a long-term view of the business and how you operate. Most people, I shouldn't say most, many people come off of a book depressed. And what I mean by that is, they put all this effort and energy and time, and they're proud of it and all that sort of stuff. And, 6 or 8 months later, they sold maybe a couple thousand copies and the world really hasn't changed. But, given that it's been 18 months, the book is no longer sort of, you're not in book mode anymore, right? Book mode is 3, 4, 5 months when you're launching and it's sort of new and you do the blog tours and you do all that sort of stuff. Now it's integrated into how you operate, and you're getting into higher ticket, bigger level engagements that are more consultative than the commodity side of the training market. Seems like that's the big game changer for you.
Yeah, and it is. And I think, you touched on it big. I was never caught up in the book mode. And I think, as you said, I think probably some people get too caught up with the book. It's an ego piece. Maybe it was the fact that I'd done a television show and my ego had already been just pretty much destroyed by bad reviews and all that sort of stuff. But I was never in the book mode. We never came out with that because, as I said, I'm not putting my career on being a writer. I enjoy speaking, and I'm fortunate enough to speak around the world. But I don't go, I'm a speaker. What I end up being is I'm a business person that just happens to enjoy a lot of these mediums around thought leadership and being able to share my message because I love that. But at the end of the day, what the focus was, and again, the hope was, is that this was another way to get my message out. And, I do a podcast, and, I do TV segments, and I go, each one of those mediums is just a way to get the message out. And as you said, you know what? When you sell a few thousand copies of a book, you might hit that right person. And whether it's your video, whether it's your blog, in some way, all we've ended up doing, whether it was a strategy, but what we've done is we've created many different ways in which someone can hear our message. And listen, I'm not for everybody, but if somebody kind of comes across a video, or maybe the book picks it up in the bookstore, that's happened. And what I can say is that out of all of the pieces that we have working, and we have a lot of stuff working, is that the book has produced the two big pieces and it was based on the fact that what we did was apply a very operational piece. And I think that was where businesses become most comfortable, because I think we become, I can sort of fall into the category, become too human resource focused, too philosophical focused, too book focused. And I'm like, you got to stay business focused if that's what you want to be. And that's what obviously we wanted to be at the time.
Sure. So let me unpack some of the things that you said there, because I think they're really key. Number one thing that you said is, I'm not for everyone. So I think and I love that. And you're clearly not for everyone, which is why you're successful, right? So, if a traditional or sort of conservative HR person, oh man, he uses the F word, or he doesn't think the way we do. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. Then go have another cup of tea. I'm not your cup of tea, right? I think one mistake that people make earlier on is, oh man, I don't want to offend, and I want to please everyone, and I want to serve everyone. And you dilute it to the point where it's commodity. There's nothing to it, right? And the fact that you have a distinct style, you have a distinct perspective, you have the gravitas and the experience to talk from it, and that you're not for everyone is awesome. Second thing that you said that I think was key is all these different mediums that you do, whether it's television, the book, talking head on CNN or whatever the case may be. It's just another place to get someone in the door, right? It's if the first touch point is a blog, great, come on in. If the first touch point is they picked up the book at the the airport or the local bookstore, whatever the case is, come on in. And you don't know exactly where they're going to come from, nor does anyone. So you've got to put your markers everywhere. So anything you would add to that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And here's the piece that I think I've discovered is that I'm going to use the book. And as I said, I wrote the book as 13 blogs. So the blogs were written 2 years ago, maybe even 3, some of the first ones. I've repurposed that content so many times, which means, I think one of the learning lessons is that I've done and that we're getting, I think, a lot better at is getting very good at repurposing content. It doesn't have to be all original. I keep coming back to, I've used the blogs. I might go back in, or actually someone from my office might go back in and touch up the blog and add some latest research and send it back out to the world again.
My guest is Erica Anderson. Erica is the founding partner of Proteus, which is a coaching, consulting, and training firm that focuses on leadership readiness. She is the author of several books, the most recent being Be Bad First, Get Good at Things Fast to Stay Ready for the Future. That was in 2016. And then she also did Leading So People Will Follow, Being Strategic, Plan for Success, Outthink Your Competitors, Stay Ahead of Change. Several others. She's contributed to HBR. She's worked with some awesome companies like Hyatt and GE. She's a speaker, been featured in Harvard Business Review. And here she is today. So welcome aboard, Erica.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, so am I. So obviously we were just talking before we hit the little record button here. You've been doing this for 30 years.
Yes, I have been doing this for almost 30 years. 2020 will be the 30th anniversary of my company.
That's awesome. And I'm assuming everything is exactly the same as it was when you started, right?
You bet, yeah. 100%, especially when it comes to, technology.
Yeah, exactly. You're still faxing and things. What have been the things that you've done the most of in terms of activity, whether it's authorship, speaking, consulting, that's been the most gratifying and then the most profitable?
Oh, that's a great question and a hard one to answer, I might add. So just to do a little bit of a thumbnail for your listeners, our business is, as you said, coaching, consulting, and training, really. And so a lot of executive coaching. We do a lot of consulting around change, around organization effectiveness, around the future that companies want to create for themselves. And also we do a lot of leadership and management training. And those are differently profitable depending on what we do. And then I personally have written books, as you said, and also do some speaking, although my core of what I do is serve clients, run the business, and deliver facilitation and coaching. That's the core of what I do.
Right.
And as far as making money on books, I have not made money on books. My books have done well, according to how business books usually do. I've sold probably 60,000 books altogether. But that's some people make money that way. way, but for us, it's been a huge credibility builder, a huge brand builder. It's lovely to have all the books as resources to give to clients in addition to the in-person stuff that we do with them. I have not made money on my books.
Yeah, so let me just play that back. So 60,000 books is an impressive number in this market, and that's looks like 4 books there. So even if you equally divided that, and it probably doesn't, it's 15,000 a book. That would be considered a success today by the world of publishers, right?
Yeah, and it's basically the longer my books are good backlist books. My first one now has 25 or 30,000 sold. My second one is between 15 and 20. My third, so it goes like that.
Got it. So the books are a great calling card, not a great money maker. How do you sort of weigh and balance all these things together, right? Because you said you're not a speaker, but you speak. I mean, your primary revenue is the company, right? And maybe tell us a little bit about what the company does and how it's connected to the IP and the content and such that you've written about.
Oh, I love answering that question. So as you said, the core of what we do is leader readiness. We really help leaders get ready to lead, for their very first leader jobs, and then continue to be ready to grow and become more influential as all the way up to being the CEO or the chairman of the board. And help them also be ready as leaders, but be ready for the future, be more resilient, be more planful, all those kinds of things. And we have 3 practice areas that we work in to do that. The first we call developing leaders, strengthening leaders. And that's where our executive coaching practice and our team coaching practice live. So it's how do you help leaders be better in groups and individually? And our second practice area we call clarifying vision strategy. And we do that. We help people get clearer about where they want to take their companies and how to get there. Our change management practice also lives in there. And our org effectiveness practice. And then our third area is called building skills and knowledge. And we do leadership and management training. And we can deliver our own IP, but we also can help client trainers to deliver our IP or other IP.
Got it.
So that's the whole business. We have about 20 consultants and then a staff. And the way the IP is connected is my Leading So People Will Follow book is strongly connected to our strengthening leaders area. We use it in executive coaching to help people see how followable they are as leaders. The Growing Great Employees, and actually all 4 of the books, we have IP around all 4 of them for our building skills and knowledge part in our training. And Being Strategic book is really the heart of what we do in clarifying vision and strategy. We use that process that's described in that book and in helping organizations figure out the future they want to create for themselves. So it's really baked in.
So it sounds like it's fairly straightforward for you to map sort of books or subsets of your book, chapters, sections, etc., against different solutions and offerings for different segments of the business. Is that a fair?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about that, because I think what happens in too many instances that I see, someone writes a book and they think about it from their perspective. So that might be from an academic's perspective, a consultant's perspective, an experienced business perspective, and they're sharing what they know around something: leadership, management, resilience, innovation, whatever. But they're not thinking about it from the other perspective, of the consumer perspective, meaning how do I, as an organization, process this information at the enterprise level, meaning different levels of the organization, frontline, mid-level, leadership, etc., in order to get people proficient in that, right? So when you're writing the books, or when you've written the books and the articles, how does that impact sort of your style and the way that you put the work out there?
It's a wonderful question, and it's different for the different books. So the first book I wrote, which was called Growing Great Employees, is really sort of the art and practice of being a good people manager. It came out 11 years ago. And it was literally written based on our existing IP. I felt like we had really good skill-based management training.
So wait, you had, just to make sure I get it. So you've got the consulting firm, skill-based management training, and then the light bulb goes off and says, I think we're going to write a book and sort of use that as the forcing mechanism to codify and put together all that I've got. Is that?
In a way, yeah, that's pretty close. What I actually said to myself was, we do all this stuff and it's really helpful, and I don't see a book like this.
Okay.
I thought, okay, there are books like Peter Drucker books that are dense, kind of philosophical tones about management. And then there were kind of, 1 minute manager, quick tips and tricks. But I didn't really know of a book that was not just a compendium, but that was a real, like, Boy and Girl Scout handbook. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, if you want a good people manager, here's the why and the what of doing that in a very practical, hands-on, roll up your sleeves kind of way. I couldn't find that book. And I thought, okay, I could write that book. That would be a helpful book based on what I already know and what we're already doing. So that's how that came to be.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.